like to call to order the regular Board of Trustees meeting for March 25th, 2025. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Karsbeck.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Wing.
Here.
Trustee Ayers.
Here.
Trustee Kurtz.
Present.
And Trustee Albrecht will be absent this evening.
Thank you, Clerk. Excellent. Next on our agenda is citizen participation. This is a chance for folks in the audience to speak to things that are not on tonight's agenda. Everyone who signed up is speaking to stuff that's not on tonight's agenda, which is great. Once I call your name, if you could come to the front, please state your name and address, and if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We can start off with Amber Schneider. Welcome, or welcome back. And Amber, this is all written down if you could restate it. Yeah, thanks. We moved it. Trying to make your life hard.
So first, real quickly, my buddies want to let me say, please remember the senior group.
Okay, I'll see them tomorrow.
They are growing like crazy, and they would love to have a good place to hang out.
Thank you. Just to confirm, is your address 524 Redwood Circle?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Amber.
The other thing is, I have a kitty cat that is my family that has gotten me through several deaths and brain surgery here in the last few years. He's 16 years old, and his only fun thing in life anymore is to sit out and sun himself in my backyard. I have a neighbor cat that comes over my fence and beats him up. And I've repeatedly talked to the neighbors. They really don't care. So I called animal control and made a report. And they said Berthoud is one of the only towns in this area that doesn't have leash laws in town for cats. So there's really not much that animal control can even do to help me with what's going on. I talked to them about other towns in this vicinity, and they said Loveland and Fort Collins both have leash laws in town for cats. I don't want to affect barn cats because I know they're doing a job, and that's not the same as what's going on with me. But I would love to have some way to protect basically my family member from what's going on for him that I don't have right now. So I'd like the same laws for cats as dogs in town. That's my only request.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you mind leaving, if you could send an email to just one of them? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Linda Wilson, and I live at 1461 Merlette Street here in Berthoud. And my topic is the detention pond for Heron Point homes, the single homes and apartments. And that pond is located on the west side of the Berthoud Parkway. Last evening at 6 o'clock, I attended our HOA special meeting at the Berthoud Rec Center. The purpose of the meeting was to update the homeowners regarding the HOA board's decision to seek counsel from Burke Simpson's law firm concerning construction defects with our west detention pond. And this one services only, it was constructed only to serve the single family dwellings and the apartments. It's currently not emptying properly, so the homeowners have 60 days to agree or disagree to proceed with legal actions against the construction company for possible defects. Representatives from the town of Berthoud and the construction company were invited to this meeting, but neither attended. The homeowners left the meeting with 2 unanswered questions, which I hope you can either answer or give me some direction to whom in the town we can contact. Now, we presume that the original plans for this detention pond were approved before and after it was constructed. Is this standard procedure? So my question is it standard procedure? And if you don't know, who can we contact to see if that's part of the building process?
Okay, Administrator Kirk, can you kick that over to you? I don't know.
I've been in contact with Stacy Glasgow from the HOA. I've talked to him many times about this issue. Is Stacy the president of the HOA? I honestly, I'm not sure.
No, but he was the person who said he would go and talk to the town.
Yeah, and he and I have communicated back and forth about this via email for quite some time. He sent me an email last Friday while I was out of town and invited me to the meeting on Monday last night, which I wasn't able to attend. So, sorry, what were your questions again,
So
Ms.
the
Wilson?
the first question is, are these detention ponds inspected or given a permit before so that they're constructed properly? And then after they're constructed, are they inspected to make sure that they were done properly?
Yeah, so our standard procedure today, and Heron Point was built 7 or 8 years ago. It should have been the same then, but just speaking off the top of my head, I don't know what they were doing at the time. But our standard procedure is the developer's engineer designs the storm drainage improvements. Our engineers review them and make sure that we believe that they will work as designed and that they meet our stormwater management plans. We have construction observers who observe the construction in the field and ensure that they're constructed properly or per plan. And so that should typically occur on every development.
Okay. And then the second question is, and maybe Stacy addressed this with you too, there's a ditch that our detention pond is supposed to drain into. And that ditch last summer was full of water. It continues to be full of water and full of cattails and this, so it doesn't drain into there. And so when Stacy talked to someone from the city, they said what they were gonna do is work on this ditch, clean it out a little bit more, and put in a cement liner. But that has not happened yet, and so we were wondering if it's on the schedule and when possibly that would happen.
Yeah, and I did respond to Stacy about that, but to answer your question, Ms. Wilson, the town does intend to line the bottom of that ditch with concrete. It's very flat. It's like 1% fall, if that. It's a drainage ditch that actually runs in front of the county subdivision there south of Heron Point. I don't know, it got moved when the road got widened by the county, but it is in our right of way, so it's kind of a weird, typically drainage ditches are the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. I'm not sure, I don't know that it matters at this point. We know that there's an issue. It does flow. So last summer, the Heron Point Pond, we believe there were some issues with maintenance in the Heron Point Pond that were keeping it from draining properly. The town asked the HOA a couple of times to deal with it. We said if you didn't, we were gonna pump it because we were concerned that it would overflow. We ultimately ended up having to pump that detention basin. We pumped it right into the ditch and it flowed downstream like it was supposed to. So it does hold water in that ditch, but when we pumped water from the detention basin into that ditch, it went downstream and didn't cause any flooding issues. And so I think there are 2 issues. I don't know, I think they are related, but they're not causal, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So our intent is to line that ditch this year. It does need some design work because I don't know that we can correct the limited slope, but by lining the bottom of that ditch with concrete, it will help limit cattail growth and it'll also help that water flow a little smoother. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've been in communication with Stacy. Maybe if we get another email just to follow up, so that conversation could keep
Because we
going?
were told that it was pumped into a manhole.
Okay.
We were afraid to pump it into that ditch because it wasn't moving. So
It
thank you
did,
very much.
yes, ma'am. It did go into a manhole that discharges immediately into that ditch. So,
Okay, great. Thank
If
you
you
very
wanna
much.
yeah, send an email too. We can keep that going, that conversation if you need anything else.
Okay, because we're in
You're on
that
timeline.
point, shall we sue, shall we not sue, depending on is there a defect, is there not? Thank you very much.
Next would be, Robert, I apologize, Robert Praise? Okay, thank you. Is, 3074 Heron Lakes Parkway correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
So my question is about the gates at Heron Lakes. My understanding is the gates were approved by the town of Berthoud. They were built according to the specifications of the town of Berthoud. Everybody was in agreement with what was gonna happen. And 4 years later, we still don't have operational gates. We don't even have the gates finished on the north side, so they're kind of unsightly because we can't finish building them. I'd like to know what is the issue. Nobody's denying access to our property. We'd like to have cameras for security and we'd like to have control of what's going on. We've had cars stolen off our driveways. Why can't we have operational gates with cameras?
Thank you. I can just give a brief history on this. This might be something I'll turn over to Administrator Kirk too. There's just been a lot of controversy about allowing a gated community. So I know there was a lot of folks around this time last year coming to the town. I don't know where that conversation went. Do you have any updates on going back to the developer? I don't know if there was a compromise.
so I'll try to get the history right. The development plans did show gates. There was no, this is public right-of-way. It's not private, those are not private streets. And so gating public right-of-way is uncommon, but there was an agreement in place with the developer at some point in the past that allowed the construction of the gates, but there was no agreement about how those gates would operate. And it's important that there's some clarity about how those gates operate because they should not restrict public access on public roads. We put together an agreement last year with the developer. The developer asked it to be pulled from the agenda before that meeting because we identified this prior agreement that had existed and there may have been some conflicts. We wanted to make sure there weren't. And actually, nobody on staff at the time, nobody had been here long enough to know that that agreement existed, and the developer, I don't think, remembered or knew that agreement existed. So there was an updated agreement. There was some back and forth with the developer's attorney, and perhaps Attorney Smith remembers, I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it's in their court.
That's not, we just had a board meeting today and they said it's always in your court. That's why I came to this meeting.
Okay.
I've gone to the Metro board meetings many times, asking the question, and all the neighbors are, we want our gates. So we ask the question, and it's always the town of Berthoud. And they keep telling us it was fully approved by the town of Berthoud, and then somehow it changed right at the end.
What if,
And we're not restricting access, we truly are not.
Sure.
We want operational cameras.
I don't know about the camera situation. This might be, I hate to keep throwing this to emails, but it sounds like both sides are saying it's in the other one's court. Maybe it's staff can go back and see where we are on that.
Absolutely.
I know it'll
yeah.
be a controversial conversation, but it's gonna have to happen no matter what. You are well represented with Mr. Wing on the board here too from your development. So maybe we can just go back through that and see whose court this really is in.
Okay,
And, yeah, obviously it'll be on the agenda if it is in ours.
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. is it Steve Candy?
Actually, I'm kind of on the same topic.
Okay.
Um,
Is 2940 Newfound Lake?
Newfound Lake.
Okay, thank you.
I'm concerned with not the gates so much, though I have been told that the gates are designed to just open, right, when vehicles approach, so there's that. But I'm not really concerned with that. I'm more concerned with the fact that the Metro has acted and said that they are prohibited by the city from even landscaping the two entry areas. They're mud, weeds, some rocks, and so it's unsightly. And I can't understand, even if there was the argument about gates or no gates, which I don't really care about, that they can't put in, sod, decorative rock, flowering perennials or something, Would the city have a problem with that?
I can't speak for, I just can't see why we would. Do you know, Mr. Kirk?
I have no idea,
I
honestly.
don't see how that is metro property. I don't see how we have any say on that.
Even if it's within the public right of way, they have an approved landscape plan, I assume. I don't think there's,
Yeah, they said.
there are some areas along Grand Market where there's not non-potable water. And so they have an agreement with the town that requires them to install non-pot water to their landscaping. They're not obligated to install the landscaping until that area is developed. So we're not making them do it, but we're not prohibiting them from doing it.
If they wanted to, would they need a landscape plan?
They should have an approved landscape plan
I think they do.
for that area. And so, again, I think, so the roundabout, I think this is the same issue, so I apologize, I may be speaking out of turn. But the roundabout at Grand Market, it was their responsibility to landscape. For a couple of years, it didn't get done. We finally held up their development project and said, we're not gonna let you get any more development applications through until you landscape this roundabout. Their concern was their water agreement requires them to install non-potable water to all the landscaped areas. I told them at the time, I would rather you have this landscaped on potable water than not landscaped for the next however many years until something happens. So we gave them a potable water meter because it's a very low water use landscaping anyway, so that we could get that landscaped. I'd frankly be fine doing the same with the other areas, but again, we're not forcing them to do it because they're not typically obligated to do that landscaping until the adjacent property develops. But we're also not prohibiting them from
Right.
doing it.
The trustee wing has something to bring up.
The narrative has changed on this a couple times, if you've been around a while. And once upon a time, it had nothing to do with the gates. It was strictly the next phase in the water. I think it's very uncommon for a neighborhood like that not to have their entryway landscaped.
Yeah, really. I mean,
In 6 comparable
Looks pretty
neighborhoods,
bad.
it's always one of the first impressions. So they said it was a water issue, but there's water going to the
And that wasn't
townhouses,
mentioned
there's
today
water
at all.
going to the roundabout, there's water going to all the commercial buildings right there. So I'm not sure how that plays out. But and then it was new to me to hear, the new narrative was, it's because the gates, that's why we can't landscape it. So I think you just heard kind of from the powers to be,
Yeah.
that's not what's stopping the landscaping.
Could you,
If you, do you want,
author an email to?
yeah, do you want to email,
to them?
Chris, do you have a card or does anyone, I don't,
I'm sorry, I don't have a card with me, but
I have one right now.
if you could email, Clerk Samora can give you his card.
Okay.
If you could email him, then Chris or Administrator Kirk or someone from staff can reply. You have an official email.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
They're the powers that be. I don't see an issue with it. So.
I don't either.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak, didn't have a chance to sign up? All right, thank you. I'll close that public comment, and we can move on now to our regular agenda. We have a long list of consent. Do trustees like anything removed from consent?
I would ask for item D to be removed.
Item D, any other items? Okay, is there a motion to approve consent minus item D?
Motion to approve consent items minus item D.
All right, is there a second? Second. I believe this is a roll, clerk, do we have a roll call vote on this?
Trustee Wing,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy,
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes, all right, items removed from consent will be considered next, so, January 2025 financial information, Mayor Pro Tem?
I have one line item that I wanted to bring up. I just had a question on it. This would be on page 6 of 30. It was with regards to the CIRSA expenditure for loss control rebate. I would just wanted an explanation on that one once you get to it. It was in the amount of $488,501. $488,501.67.
I'm not sure of that description, so I
Yeah.
apologize if I'm wrong here. But we pay all of our insurance typically in one payment to CIRSA, so Colorado Integrated Risk Services Agency is our kind of pooled insurance agency. And we have a long list of insurance policies, cybersecurity policies, vehicle, general liability, on and on, workers' compensation, all through CIRSA. I believe that is our payment, but I apologize, I don't actually recall off the top of my head.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, good question.
I signed all of our insurance paperwork last month, so I believe I signed that check, and I'm embarrassed to admit, I don't recall off the top of my head
No.
what that is, but I'm quite
If it's,
confident.
yeah, I can't remember then either. If I had to sign up 488, if it's over 10,000, I'd be signing it too, or 5,000. I can't remember that. So
Yeah.
interesting.
I was just wondering, it was just kind of an odd title for that one, and just, in the future, if there's a further breakdown of that, maybe.
I'll absolutely provide that information to you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head.
No, that's fine. Just, yeah.
Since we're on this page, or we're on this, were you done? Were you done?
Oh, I'm done, yeah.
I didn't scrub this today, but I see that our revenue is like double. Excuse me, it's half. Our actual revenue is half of what the budget calls for, 500,000 compared to $1 million. Any comment on that?
Yeah, so that's typical, the first couple of months of the year, because there's some balancing that goes on between fiscal years.
Okay.
And our revenues are a couple of months behind, so we actually won't receive our January revenue until March. And so we backdate those revenues to January, but, so we will receive those revenues. They've been collected as sales taxes and property tax, typically sales tax. But we won't actually get it and account for it until March.
You don't have to answer this, but now I'm looking at the expenditures and it's $5 million under budget. So again, you don't have to go in there, but that's material.
Yeah, so why are we listing half, but Chris, but the administrator clerk, but we're back 3 months? Would we just not list anything until we get the?
Yeah, we haven't received that revenue, so we can't account for it until we get it in March.
So there's just a projection.
So the January sales tax, yeah, and so when you see the year-to-date budget, so this is another good example. That's a great question, Trustee Wing. So on the expenditure side, water and wastewater, you'll see are really where the big variances and the special funds. And so what happens on the expenditure side is we have a total year expenditure. And in those special funds and in water and wastewater, most of the expenditure happens later in the year, especially in the summertime, right? And so, but all of that expenditure gets averaged out on a per month basis. So the year-to-date budget is just you take the total expense divided by 12, that's your year-to-date budget. But we didn't expect to spend that much in 1 month. Most of those expenditures will occur later as part of capital projects. And so that's why you see that big variance.
So
that's
said a
great
different
question.
way, it's gonna catch up.
It will absolutely
And
catch up.
again, as a business person, I would rather have the nice,
Absolutely.
much less expense than what was budgeted. And then same thing, I think, with the general fund, essentially, because it's year-to-date, it's probably 2/3 budgeted, just almost flatlined, if you will. But at the end of the quarter is when some of the revenue kicks in. Is that close?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of explaining
Okay.
it. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Anything else regarding D? Good question. All right, is there a motion to approve item D consent?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem has moved on this. Trustee Wing is seconded. Clerk, could we have another roll call vote, please?
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy,
Yes.
Trustee Wing,
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbach.
Yes, okay. We move on to our really only big item tonight, and that's the sustainability plan update. And that's by our economic and sustainability, is that, right? I get your title right, Brian?
Economic Sustainability Manager.
You're expert manager? Okay, awesome. Welcome and congrats.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your time tonight, Board and Mayor. For those who don't know me, Brian DuBois, Economic Sustainability Manager for the town. Quick background, in 2024, the Board created the goal of establishing a Sustainability Action Plan. Staff retained the Cumming Group to assist with the development of this plan. Since November of 24, since we started having meetings, we have conducted routine meetings with a consultant to establish a planning process and provide ongoing updates. First step was the planning process, and our second step has been to conduct an inventory of existing conditions, which will be talked about next, and then that will be along with our upcoming steps where we're currently at. And with that, I'll hand it over to Katya. Katya, sorry.
Oh.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Katya Balakovsky. I'm a sustainability consultant with the Cumming Group. I've been with the Cumming Group for almost 7 years now, working primarily in the public space, so transportation agencies, local governments, with a focus on sustainability planning and implementation. So I've been working with Brian and Town Administrator Kirk for a few months now, getting kickstarted on the Sustainability Action Plan. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've accomplished to date, some background, and our next steps, like Brian mentioned. I can just control this. Yeah, okay. So like I mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about what our planning process looks like and the steps that we as consultants will take to support the development of this plan. We'll talk a little bit about what peers are doing, state, county, and city level in the region. Talk a bit about the regulatory context, which is driving sustainability. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the initial results of our data analysis. And then at the end, we'd love to hear, any feedback, any gaps that you see, anything you would like to see as outcomes from the sustainability plan. So definitely would like to open up the floor there. So I will start with just some background on what the planning process looks like. So our first phase of the work was really to look through the inventory of existing conditions, as we call it, which entails a few items. So that's the regulatory context, what policies are driving sustainability initiatives in the state of Colorado. It's looking at what you're already doing that's related to sustainability, and then setting that baseline through looking at your data across various resource use categories. As part of this work, we are also translating that resource use into greenhouse gas emissions, also known as a carbon footprint, so you'll hear me refer to that throughout the presentation. These baseline results will really serve as the foundation for developing goals and strategies. It's intended to be a very engaging process, talking with town staff as well as the community to essentially narrow down a list of feasible goals that will ultimately be included in that sustainability action plan. And then as our final step, we are also going to develop an implementation framework for the town. It's going to be essentially a high-level tool to help prioritize specific projects related to sustainability. So it'll include some considerations around cost of projects, timeline, whether there's something that can be accomplished in the medium, long-term, short-term. So that is going to be part of our final deliverable on top of the plan itself. So like I mentioned, stakeholder engagement is a key part of this process. We definitely don't want a sustainability plan that's developed in a vacuum because our experience is that it's not successful in the implementation. So we've outlined a few stakeholder engagement activities that we will be pursuing in the coming months. This is kind of our kickoff to the stakeholder engagement, so I want to hear from you all first. But we are planning a series of internal meetings, so this will include a group workshop held virtually with members of various departments from the town to get an initial idea on priorities, feasibility, leverage their existing knowledge on what's working and what's not working from a process standpoint, because we may identify some synergies there. And then we're also planning a series of targeted meetings. We have 3 currently outlined: community development, public works, water utilities. This may shift a little bit as we get into it, but the idea is that there will be some departments that will require some more in-depth engagement, especially when it comes to developing those goals and strategies. We'd love to also engage the community, so we are proposing holding an in-person community workshop, getting an idea of what the priorities are. Does the community care about water? Do they care about preserving natural resources? And we can make sure that that community voice is carried throughout the plan. From there, we'll also have some updates that are happening more asynchronously, not meeting format. So we're looking at some update memos for you all so we can keep you updated on progress. We will certainly be sending out both the draft measures before they make it into the plan, as well as the final plan document, or as well as the draft plan document, for you all to review. And at this point, we would also like to propose a public comment period to allow the community to actually, mark up the draft plan and let us know what's working and not working for them. The way this usually works in our experience working with local jurisdictions is we ultimately leave the decisions on which comments are integrated to town staff, but we want to make sure that we document each one of those pieces of feedback. So we talked a little bit about how we're going to execute it, kind of the key categories that we're looking at for this plan. I mentioned greenhouse gas emissions in that climate category. We're going to look at energy, water, solid waste, which includes landfill waste, recycling, organics, transportation, and then green buildings. So looking at green building standards, but also building infrastructure and systems. So HVAC, opportunities for building electrification, opportunities for low flow fixtures, that kind of thing. And then I finally want to mention on the planning side that this document is not intended to work on its own. We are planning to make sure that it kind of serves as an umbrella connecting some of the other documents that you already have guiding your processes, your comprehensive plan, your design guidelines for architecture, as well as your landscape design guidelines. And we've also been coordinating with Intera, the consultant, developing the water efficiency plan, so we can make sure that there are synergies along the way and we're not duplicating efforts when it comes to water. So that was background on the planning process. I'm gonna talk a little bit about regulatory drivers. So there's a lot on the slide. I'm not gonna go into all of the details. What I really wanna emphasize is that Colorado, the state of Colorado, has been a leader in this space. Your first climate action plan was in 2007, at which point only a handful of other states had even used the terminology climate action or greenhouse gas emissions reductions. It was California, Oregon, and Colorado. So, really has emphasized, I really want to emphasize that longstanding history. In addition, in 2019, the state of Colorado did set its first greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, which included a 90% reduction by 2050, and also put in place a monitoring and reporting framework to actually track progress against those emission goals. And this was further refined in 2023, so you'll see SB 2316 as kind of a key regulation driving sustainability initiatives throughout the state. And finally, more recently, the state is also looking at more macro level sustainability initiatives, particularly related to cleaning of the grid, so solar, wind, integration of renewables, which plays into how cities are actually able to execute their projects. So I mentioned SB 2316, so it put in place a couple of, interim greenhouse gas reduction targets. So 65% by 2035, 75% by 2040, 90 by 2045, and finally that 100% net zero, you'll hear a term used, by 2050. So this bill applies not just to public sector, but also to private businesses. So it is a statewide goal for complete net zero. And this includes the utilities as well. So Xcel Energy, who's a major provider for the town of Berthoud, as well as the larger state of Colorado, they've also set a net zero goal of 2050. So this is something that we take into account when we do our greenhouse gas forecasting. There are certain measures that will rely on Xcel's decarbonization of their grid and them putting in place more renewables. And so with these statewide goals, there are also a couple of programs and code updates that are important to consider. The first is the Building Performance Program. This really functions as a framework for larger buildings to achieve that greenhouse gas reduction target. So it facilitates technical assistance, it requires benchmarking and measurement of energy usage, as well as greenhouse gas emissions. I will say this applies to larger buildings, 50,000 square feet and above. The town currently doesn't have a building that meets that threshold. I believe your largest building is the rec center at 49,000 square feet, so almost there, but not quite. But still important to keep in mind because it's an indicator of kind of trends of where the regulations are going. And then, of course, should you have future developments that meet that threshold, you'll be required to be compliant with this program. And in turn, this program is supported by the standards, which are essentially the compliance parameters. So really looking at energy use intensity, which is your energy usage per square foot of a building. So this is something, again, that we want to keep in mind as we move forward in the sustainability planning process. So we're not just looking at things in a vacuum, but we're kind of aligning with larger state initiatives to make sure that we're future-proofing the town's sustainability effort as the code evolves. So we talked a little bit about the regulations. I'm gonna talk for state, county, and then city plans so you have an idea of some context on what your neighbors are doing. So the state of Colorado Climate Action Plan, it's one of the most robust in the country. So, we mentioned some of those interim targets ultimately with that 100% goal by 2050. The state plan is also supported what's known as the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Reduction Roadmap, a bit of a mouthful, but it's basically a really specific roadmap of actions that need to be taken on the state level in order to meet these pretty lofty goals. So that again includes that coordination with the utility for grid decarbonization, which is kind of what everything hinges on when it comes to achieving that net zero emissions goal that frames sustainability efforts in the state. I will also mention that the state of Colorado is also exploring options for carbon removal through a couple of different technologies. So one is sequestration using soil, but the other is using direct air capture to remove carbon from the air. Essentially, fans pump air into the ground. There's a chemical reaction. You essentially remove some of the carbon dioxide that's causing the global warming phenomenon. So pretty advanced stuff happening in the state. Again, not necessarily an impact directly to the town, but important to contextualize where we're going with the plan. I also want to highlight Larimer County. Weld County does not have a specific sustainability plan. They do have sustainability goals outlined as part of their strategic plan, but Larimer County does have a specific sustainability plan. So I just want to highlight a couple of their initiatives. So reducing greenhouse gas emissions, again, that's kind of a common theme in sustainability planning these days. Diverting waste from landfill. Increasing the average miles per gallon of their county fleet, 20% by 2030. And with that, they have some supporting initiatives such as making their buildings more efficient, water master plan, as well as some open space conservation. Now I will talk a little bit about the cities. Colorado cities kind of vary in how aggressive they are. Again, they are all taking into account these larger state goals. So we see a common theme is the inclusion of a greenhouse gas reduction target, because that's kind of how Colorado frames it. It includes similar milestones, so 2030 interim milestone year, and then a 2050 kind of net zero goal for those that are implementing a strategy for reducing carbon emissions. And then the framework, generally speaking, is having those kind of larger, loftier goals, but supported by specific strategies within each. So we're not just saying preserve the ecosystem. We're saying, okay, increase the natural amount of open space and implement native plant landscaping. So there's kind of a hierarchy of goals to strategies that is common in all of these plans. And again, this is some additional information. I'm not going to go into every detail. I will just highlight Boulder is probably the most ambitious, most robust of the Colorado city plans. So again, in addition to their net zero goals, they also have what they call a carbon positive goal, which again will rely on some of those carbon removal type projects. And their timelines are actually vastly anticipated compared to the state. So they're looking at net zero by 2035 and carbon positive by 2040. Like you'll see, most of these do have a greenhouse gas reduction goal, but some are still, developing their plans. In particular, Littleton has a bit more of a general approach at this point, and one of their goals is actually to develop a greenhouse gas inventory and supporting strategies. So again, just to kind of set the stage a little bit about what's happening in the region. All right, so what are you all doing for sustainability? The good news is there's actually a lot happening already, so we have a lot to build off of. The first thing I want to highlight is the comprehensive plan. So in addition to existing efforts, which are largely focused on preservation of the ecosystem and natural spaces, we have identified that there is some momentum in creating bike and pedestrian trails, promoting land conservation, and a particular focus on tree canopy. All of which is something we want to kind of reiterate within the Sustainability Action Plan and continue to build upon. We also wanted to call out specifically the transportation element. So there is this focus on what we call active transportation, so biking and walking, which has an innate benefit when it comes to sustainability, given the reduction of travel in single occupancy vehicles. So that's something we're going to be exploring more as we talk about transportation sustainability. And yeah, was excited to see that in the comprehensive plan. And finally, I mentioned earlier, the landscape and architectural guidelines. These have some very specific sustainability callouts, solar, readiness on rooftops, an emphasis on sustainable material selection, an emphasis on native and drought-tolerant landscaping, and again, that active transportation element in particular for commercial spaces, ensuring that there's bike parking, that kind of thing. So again, not trying to recreate the wheel, but trying to leverage what the town is already doing, what we've already established in your plans and policies, and kind of roll that up under the umbrella of the Sustainability Action Plan. All right, so now that I've talked about the background quite a bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our initial findings on our calculations. So we've been collecting data on several sustainability metrics. Today I'm going to focus specifically on the municipal buildings. So town-owned and operated facilities such as Town Hall, cemetery, wastewater treatment plant. We're still waiting on a few data points from the utilities, particular on electricity from Xcel Energy and waste. So waste is omitted for now, but in electricity, we did use some available data points on standard building energy use intensities to extrapolate assumptions based on square footage. So it's not perfect yet, and we'll come back with a more refined update, but at least we have some context on usage across these resource categories. So the other forthcoming element is the community-wide assessment. So in addition to looking at the municipal buildings, our scope does include a complete inventory of waste, water, electricity, all those key metrics on a sector level for the entire community. So we'll be looking at residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, and have similar data points as well as strategies to minimize those impacts. So you see on screen kind of what we're working with as of now. Employee commuting miles, electricity. Again, this is an area where we have made some assumptions, so this number may change. Gasoline, diesel, and then actually I'm realizing that last one is therms of natural gas, not gasoline, so that's for your buildings. So these are the results. So you're looking at about 2,092 metric tons of emissions on the municipal level, excluding waste. For context, this is about 250 homes and about, I believe, 5 million miles. Confirm that number. Yeah, 5 million miles driven in a gasoline-powered car. So just to kind of contextualize what those emissions look like, the town of Fort Collins, I believe, is about 50,000 metric tons carbon dioxide equivalent. So this is what we'll call your baseline, again, pending a little bit of refinement, but the idea would be to set goals of a percentage reduction from this baseline. I will also call out on the pie chart on the right side, even though we're still early in our analysis, there are some emerging themes that we'll want to carry forward into the goal setting process, namely that electricity is by far the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. So definitely would expect some strategies framed around energy efficiency, potential for renewables, and mitigating the greenhouse gas emissions resulting from that electricity native resource use. The second, that 10% is gasoline from your vehicles. So maybe electric vehicles is something that town staff will want to explore as we kind of get into our next phases. And so like I said, next steps, we'll refine our calculations, we'll fill in any of the gaps, we'll complete a community-wide inventory as well, and then really from there we will start our more in-depth stakeholder engagement process to essentially start to refine what the goals and measures are. Our typical process is our consulting team will craft what we call an initial measures list. It's everything we can throw at the table that we think the town could benefit from to give folks something to react to and say, hey, yes, this is feasible. No, this is impossible. We'll never do this. Make this more aggressive, but we'll give something to react to based on a more refined version of those baseline results. And ultimately, through that stakeholder engagement process, refining that list and defining what's going to end up in that sustainability action plan. So that's where we're at today. The table on the bottom just gives you a summary of some of the data that's still missing, so you're aware where the numbers may be changing. And I think that was my last slide. So happy to entertain questions or comments or any feedback.
Excellent, thank you, Katya. Questions, trustees?
A couple.
Trustee Wing.
Yeah, please.
The 26% reduction goal by 2025, it's 2025, how are we doing?
So the state has not met that goal. They are on track to meet it by 2026. They have also attributed the fact that the goal is not met to some data errors in calculating their baseline. So the latest news is that 2026, they will hit that reduction. And they're also doing some data management improvements to clean up some of those baseline errors.
Coincidentally, I just happened to see something on television today that showed that the CO2 emissions have dropped substantially. Can you comment on that at all?
You mean generally speaking
I
in the
think
state
it
of
must be
Colorado?
national.
Well, there are, I think, a few things that are happening. I think implementation of renewables is a big one. You are not the only town where electricity is the biggest contributor. And also kind of on a national scale, there's a consistent increase in demand for electricity, and a lot of the utilities are implementing renewable sources as a solution to that. Of course, there are things like transmission and distribution infrastructure that are also needed, but I would venture to say that renewables are a big factor there.
And I don't want to get off our track here, but as you said that, I just thought there is a massive undertaking of data centers, which just sucks up energy
Yes.
like nothing on the planet right now. And you just wonder the impact where all that electricity is gonna come from.
Huge impact.
Luckily, this guy's working on that.
Yeah, it's,
Exactly.
Mr. Fusion.
yeah, I think if we could, figure out, nuclear fusion,
And
that'd
then,
be great.
even your next steps mentioned the stakeholder engagement, but I saw no timeline on that, or?
Oh, yes, we do have a stakeholder engagement plan, which I'm sure we can distribute to this group that has some, suggested timelines for, each of those, touch points.
And then there was a comment, I just didn't understand what it referred to exactly, but infrastructure divert 80%. What is that?
Where was that?
It was on one of your slides, it just caught my eye. And I didn't know what it was. There,
Oh,
There
divert
it is.
80% of waste.
yeah,
from
build
where-
infrastructure to divert 80% of waste from landfills.
So this is referring to essentially properly disposing of waste that isn't landfilled waste. So we're talking about organics and recyclables being diverted to the correct waste stream and being processed properly.
Okay,
So
okay.
when we talk about infrastructure, it would be recycling plants or digesters for organics or whatever that might be.
And then last question, extraction activities?
That refers to extraction of oil, natural gas from the land. So actually the disruption that comes with the actual process of getting fossil fuels as a natural resource. So there is an impact outside of burning the
Okay.
fuels, the actual
A
mining.
related question to that, I'm kind of new back to the state of Colorado from a couple of years ago, and I lived here in the 70s and 80s, and the amount of fracking that I see I'm just like, I don't know what the adjective is, but I cannot believe how much there is. And with a state like Colorado who believes in a lot of this stuff, I just was wondering if you have a comment just on how much of that unbelievable is out there.
I think there is a large volume. I think natural gas does have sustainable alternatives. There is renewable natural gas, so I'm hoping to see a trend towards using some of that. That includes like capturing methane from cows and using that as a fuel. I will also say as grid electrification happens, so as the grid becomes powered by more renewable energy, and buildings in turn transition away from natural gas systems to electric systems, that is one of the kind of long-term solutions that states across the country are looking at in order to minimize the sustainability resource use impact. And as you're building systems, get away from natural gas, the hope is that the need for fracking can be minimized and everything can be fueled from sustainable, renewable power.
That was my last question, but so with the change in administration and the ideology and the cutbacks, is there a marked impact on renewables? Are you feeling that down to the state and local levels at all?
Great question. I think the short answer is we don't know. Our past experience with this administration has been that a lot of the projects have continued. Some of the messaging around it has changed, but ultimately there are financial returns to implementing solar projects, particularly on a building level. So don't put me on this, I don't expect that there will be like a major change in terms of cities implementing renewable energy projects. What I will say is I do expect there will be fewer grants and federal incentives. Something that's been really big for solar in the past few years is a 30% tax credit from the Federal Inflation Reduction Act. So that is likely going to go away, any day now. So as will Department of Energy grants related to renewables. However, I think there's still financial incentive for renewables on that local level with some different messaging. You may not say, hey, this is a sustainability initiative. You may say this is a financial initiative, or
Sure.
This is to minimize our enterprise risk because we're building in additional energy sources. So
Good answer. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Nice presentation.
Any questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate getting some of this data in front of us. Some additional areas, we're trying to talk kind of large scope of this kind of project. I certainly agree with energy use, transportation, waste, evaluating those. and obviously water is important. I wanted to talk, I guess, maybe more about some of the aspects that might be missing
Yeah,
in
please.
big picture. Education and outreach maybe is a category. Looking at all of this through a lens of disaster, kind of mitigation and resilience, kind of top to bottom, in coordination with Lamar County Sheriff, Boulder, or Berthoud Fire District, et cetera. And then the other two areas that I really wanted to take a look at is resource protection around here is really important. So taking a look at, you know, our flora and fauna. We already are doing a lot of these things, but it's again kind of consolidating these things into this plan, particularly with our development in sensitive areas. If there's a way we can really kind of put some teeth behind that.
Sure.
That'd be kind of one more area. And then just land and soil, along with our kind of right to farm in Berthoud. I think it's important to address that aspect in here. Again, we are kind of doing a lot of these things already, but that would be another major topic I think we could bring up. But I think overall, I think we're heading in the right direction. So
That's great, yeah.
that's all I've got.
Would we be able to get a copy of your deck, or?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Is that
sure,
okay?
yeah.
Yeah.
Just send it to you. Yeah, we can send that out, no problem.
I just had a couple, the water greenhouse gas usage, is that the pumping of the water?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly, it's the energy used to pump it.
Okay. I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing me say this, but I'm always worried about when we tie water into sustainability. You know, it just seems the water's not going back to the river, so it's just how is this post being in northern system, how we use that water, kind of accounting of it. But the idea of it being an environmental issue would make a lot of sense if we were actually giving that water back to the river, taking more out. But it seems it's all been allocated for over 100 years. So my only worry with all that, I'm fine with it, is just that how that pushes our built environment to be more bleak, gray. I'm looking at a new development that just came online, and it's gravel. So I worry when we put this stuff in, that we have a plan to how to make it look as good. And I guess I'm worried. I'm not saying don't. How am I phrasing this? I do worry about how this is put as under a sustainability phrase. If it to me has a very weak link to actually being sustainable. But the pumping I understand. So with that, that would be how to convert this from treated water to non-potable water. Is that maybe?
Yes, I think that's something we should explore more. I
Okay.
think the language definitely matters, especially if this is something that, you know, is maybe an issue that's come up.
Well, this is just the
before,
will
so-
issue. This isn't the
Yeah.
board issue, so don't spend too much time on it. But, I'm very sensitive to how things look, and if spring comes along and you see
Yeah.
like gravel, it's like, oh, it's
And I guess I do just wanna mention, you know, water is always the pumping of the water that is calculated in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. It will be a pretty small fraction of your overall portfolio.
Okay.
So currently it's 6%, we're still missing waste, so that's something to keep in mind. There are also other ways to communicate it, if we wanna talk about it in terms of like electric usage, at the wastewater treatment plant and like, you know, where that's captured in terms of your emissions as opposed to calling it out as water usage and potable water. We can talk about some of those semantics to make sure that it's, you know,
Sure,
clear
but,
and
yeah,
we're.
this is just a personal
yeah,
point. But,
Yeah, no, but I really, I think it's part of why we do the stakeholder engagement is so we can hear those perspectives and
Thank
make
you.
sure that that's
And with the
reflected.
public comment, how would that be done? Is that like an online survey, or do you want to have like a town hall, or how would you want to handle that?
So it's usually a public website posting where we'll post the full plan with a comment matrix. So we'll ask folks to leave their name, email, and, you know, page number and comment. Usually it's just kind of in that online form, but we will give them the full draft plan. And like I said, then there will be some discussion internally about which comments to accept or not.
Sure, yeah. And when we talk about building materials, is that like into the detail of, for an example, I know construction waste, separating out for the county's want of getting anything we can to get recycled too. Would that be something that put like in other communities, do they have that as a push to like recommend to developers to separate their waste? Or how do we handle building materials? Is that like a list that developers could look at as an alternative building materials to use? Or are we looking at the wood, where it comes from the forest, what forest is sustainable? Like, how does that work?
Great question, and I guess the answer is, it kind of depends how deep you wanna go with
Okay.
it. So I've been framing things with this greenhouse gas emissions kind of concept in mind.
Okay.
That's becoming more and more industry standard when you're talking about building materials and disposal to do life cycle carbon analysis. So you're looking at not just like which material you're using, but where it came from, what the ultimate disposal process is, and using that as a criteria to select building materials. It can be quite cumbersome, so a lot
Yeah.
of times that's kind of like one of the more ambitious strategies you would
Okay.
put in place. But that being said, developing like guidelines or frameworks for contractors to at least reference for capital projects on like, hey, here are the best practices. I mean, you already have in your design guidelines, recommendation to use sustainable materials. So it could be a question of building out that language a little bit more to recommend considerations for embodied carbon or considerations for sustainable disposal of
Thanks. Okay.
construction.
Yeah, I don't have, I was just trying to wrap my head around that. Sustainability is such a broad term.
It
too.
is.
Like, I 100% agree with Mayor Pro Tem's topsoil issue when we have
Mhm.
developers come in, that, we have some of the best topsoil, and to
Mhm.
them it's just dirt,
Mhm.
so it's gone.
Mhm.
How does that fit into a greenhouse gas usage? I don't know, but as far as a sustainability in a local environment, I think that's very important to the
Mhm.
people, or to the farmers.
Yeah.
I'm just talking out loud now.
No, that's great, yeah, and I think that's something we should also investigate.
Like
further as well.
how we frame the word sustainability, maybe it's more than just carbon, but.
Yes, yeah. And I will say there's no single definition of
Yeah,
sustainability.
very
It's kind of custom, so we can craft that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else from the board? I wanted just to see if there's anyone in the public.
I did have one more thing I wanted to bring up. I didn't hear you bring up kind of a triple bottom line,
Mhm.
social, environmental, and economic aspects to each one of these goals that we possibly set. And I think it's just really important as we go forward with the planning of this, that there's really a focus on not taking anything away with any of these goals, that we can hopefully achieve 2 to 3 of these with every goal that we pursue, along with really a focus on just how we can benefit locally from this, locally from an economic perspective, from an efficiency perspective, how we can bring local products and businesses to the forefront of this whole situation. So.
Absolutely, and I personally really appreciate that perspective. It's rare that I get feedback that like, hey, we want to do triple bottom line approach, but definitely integrating, the social and the economic considerations on top of the planet element, I think is important, and we'll definitely look at kind of community co-benefits throughout this process.
That's a great way to phrase it, sustainability. Sorry,
No, please.
I'm thinking about water again, but there is an economic sustainability for a
yep.
consumer that they spend less on it. But as far as an environmental thing, I have an issue with. But yeah, to the person paying money, that is
Right.
or for the town, yeah, I get that. Okay.
Can I comment on the water thing?
Yeah, you bet.
Oh, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it is complicated, and I think it's unique to Berkeley just not having storage and take advantage of conservation at the moment. But there is a regional aspect where the more you conserve and the less water you use, you are delaying that next increment of supply, so you're delaying that next extraction from the environment, because you're basically stretching each drop further, if that makes sense. But that's more at a regional level and not necessarily specific to just the Berkeley environment.
Yeah, I get that. No, you're saying that no future northern projects would need to be done, or that would be.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
it wouldn't need to be done by, or it wouldn't even just be northern, but if Bertha needed to develop its own incremental supply.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, if existing residents and residents that come on are more efficient, they can stretch the current portfolio further.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to bring on that new supply.
Yeah, definitely.
As soon, so, which has an environmental component. Or maybe to your point, you could defer it indefinitely, and it depends on the specific situation.
Yeah, that's what I look at. If we could indefinitely give it back to the river, that makes sense for me.
Yeah.
And I'm very environmental myself. I just see it kind of being used that, okay, save water here, but then we're putting it into more houses anyway. So to me, it's just how you allocate that water. It's not about actually giving it back to nature.
Yeah.
Anyway, I totally,
Yeah.
it does make sense.
If I could just comment on that point, I think that's a great approach generally across all the sustainability categories, is you want to reduce your resource use as the first steps and then kind of right size. So with an energy example, you would do energy efficiency before you would put solar panels on, because you want to make sure that you are right sizing your supply to the most efficient version of the demand. So something we can think about too in terms of how it's framed in the plan.
We do have bike racks, I just want to mention this, because we have bike racks downtown. It looks like a big bank sign, like a big dollar sign. That was like 20 years ago. It's an artistic way to do bike racks. So if you don't hear, we have bike racks downtown, we do. It's just they're not very well advertised.
Looks like a bike.
And there's one that looks like a bike too, yeah.
And yeah, I did see someone out
You
there
did?
going
Okay,
around
good.
today.
All right. Because I've heard that at meetings recently, it was like, we don't have bike racks.
Yeah. But, to the earlier point about education,
Yeah, that's the-
outreach,
I think that's the issue. There's
there
no
may be
science.
some kind of softer side, things that
Yeah.
aren't change your existing practices, just change how you're advertising it to the
Absolutely.
public.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to? Okay. Anything else from the board? It's awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Very excited about it. Very cool.
It's the trustee work with the town.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm happy to do it.
And Brian as well.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, everyone. All right, well, you guys. We're not here till midnight tonight, which is really weird, so I don't know what to do.
Hey, we haven't got to reports yet. Let's-
Okay.
Can we add something from the?
Nothing controversial right now?
Take a 20-minute break.
I really need to take a break.
Might even have time to.
Let's start off with reports. Trustee Hardy.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Trustee Ayers.
No reports, just a question. Administrator Kirk, the construction on 56 east of town, is that the beginning of the future wastewater system?
It is.
Okay.
So the Farmstead project, there's a couple of construction activities going on out there by the Farmstead project, County Line Road. But what's currently underway is the installation of that 30-inch sewer line that runs north-south and will ultimately go up kind of parallel to First Street on the east side of First Street. But that is the beginning phase. You start at the downstream end and go up, right? But Farmstead is required to install that portion through their development.
County Line Road, any kind of update on when that's gonna be open again?
I do not remember off the top of my head. Our community development director, Ann, is here. I don't know if she knows off the top of her head. It is expected to be closed, I think, until the end of April, but it got started late because of some issues with an unknown line from a different utility provider.
Thank you, Mayor Karsbeck, and members of the town trustees. They're hoping to have it done this spring, so I would tell you to anticipate September 1st, and then you'll be happily rewarded with something early.
They do have to do some major excavation work, which is why County Line Road is closed through that stretch and detoured. When they get to the roundabout construction, there will be what's called a shoe fly, but basically like a kind of a bypass around that. But there will be some pretty significant traffic control through there for quite a while at that kind of County Line Road area as the roundabout gets constructed and as the sewer line gets installed.
I think I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. I'm trying to fill space. So
No need.
questions. Thank you.
Trustee Wayne?
On Facebook today, with the community, someone asked about, is there a movie being shot on 287 in Mountain? Is there something going on that somebody would ask that question? Does anyone have a clue at all?
Clerk, I don't even know how.
There's a.
Oh, here we go.
He knows.
He's like,
I appreciate that somebody knows because my wife texted me during the meeting and said, "Did you know there's a movie being shot in town?" So
Seriously?
Yeah, thank you for hearing me out, Mayor and members of the board. My name is Josiah Thiemann. I'm a sergeant with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, currently acting lieutenant. I'm assuming that comment came in yesterday.
I
was
saw it
today.
today, but it could have been
So
yesterday.
yesterday we took a Loveland attempted homicide shooting suspect into custody in that neighborhood, close to that, and our resources were staging near that intersection.
Okay.
There's no no current danger to the public. Suspect's in custody currently, but he was involved in a drive-by shooting during a road rage incident in Loveland.
Oh, so they're seeing a bunch of police cars and they're assuming movie? Is that what's going on?
now I will say there may be a separate activity going on today. So
Maybe it was the media?
So, and for members of the public and the board, today we did have a suspicious package at Berthoud Fire that we addressed. It was a and I know that we've been in communication with the manager as well, but there was absolutely no danger to the public. It was an elderly citizen that wanted to discard of some hazardous material, and thought that the best way to do that would be to put it inside of a pressure cooker, inside of a box, duct taped next to the fire department, and not tell anybody. So it became a bomb squad deal. So if you saw the closure on Welch between Second and Third this
Oh,
afternoon,
wow,
that was
okay. I did-
that was also not a movie. There's no current danger to the public.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Also not.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem?
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
Speaking of movies in the town of Berthoud, there was a movie filmed here. It was called Finding the Zone. And it recently won Best Family Picture at the Hollywood Real Independent Film Festival.
Wow.
When was it made?
Well, this wasn't the one you're talking
Baseball
about.
movie.
This was a
It
couple.
was based, it was a baseball movie, yeah.
Wow.
Based off of the life of a St. Louis Cardinal baseball player. His name is escaping me right now.
Cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, so anyways, the town's a winner.
Report, all right, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Attorney Smith and Administrator Kirk, for putting up with all the emails I've sent over the past few days. Just want to give some updates real quick. Sat in for the hearing. I didn't get a chance to testify on HB 25-1272, which was the construction bill for middle housing and stuff. That generally, from what I perceived, has wide bipartisan support right now. It passed 12-1 out of committee, and it sounds like the building industry wants to expand it. So I just figured I'd give an update on that. Still open to supporting a resolution. If anyone else would like to support that, let Administrator Kirk know. I'd like to thank Berthoud Fire Protection District and LCSO and all our partners after the 80 fire. I was at the park at the time when I got the notice and stuff, and with my experience in Forest Service and Park Service, like having 30-40 mile an hour winds out of the west and the fire, it's pretty scary. So I want to thank you all for getting it under control as fast as you did. And my sympathies go out to the family that lost their home. I also brought up the resolution that the Berthoud Fire Protection District is proposing in May, but it sounds like the chief will be here in April, so I will hold my comments on that. And the last thing, looked into the Mountain and Ninth crosswalk issue with the removal of the school zone. Got in touch with some of the folks at TSD and CDOT, and it sounds like we're all gonna hopefully get together and discuss this real soon about some measures that we can take to improve that crosswalk situation. So that's all I've got for now.
Great, thank you. My meeting with the mayor and chiefs was very passive, very good. A lot of it focused on the fire, and like Trustee Murphy said, it just phenomenal job by the sheriff's office and our fire district. And a lot of people in the crowd were commenting. One guy was a retired professional that moved here from somewhere in the Denver metro, and he was just talking about how he lives right by there, but just the response time was just unheard of. And the intergovernmental agreements having Johnstown all the way to Fort Collins in the area. It sounds like you guys had hoses out too, residential hoses putting out fires. So just a really incredible job. So thank you guys for keeping us safe like that. The rest of that stuff, yeah, the school zone was also brought up at that meeting. Sergeant Williamson kind of briefly explained that we lost it. I didn't really know anything else. So the town put out a post about that with a link that folks could comment to CDOT on. And thank you for following up on that. It was really surprising that CDOT would do that, given we have more students now than ever and more traffic now than ever, that this is an appropriate time to pull a school zone, but on my head. And then another thing would be potholes on County Road 7. This is Bill Markham's request, but he lives on North County Road 7. That's not us, right?
County Road 7 north of Highway 56 is not the town's.
Well,
there is a stretch of dirt road on County Road 7 south of Ursa Major, so like south of 56 as you're heading towards Meade. It's very difficult for our team to maintain. They regrade it.
This is
almost
north
weekly.
side, so that's
But if it's
Weld,
the
right?
north side, it's Weld County.
Okay,
is.
that's what I told him. Oh,
Mr. Markham reached out to me about that previously, and I told him that at the time, so.
Okay, maybe I'll
North of 56 is not ours.
I'll bring it up at the MPO. Maybe Weld can look into Finally, do we have a strategic plan?
For,
Just the town, I know, like, that was bringing up at the mayor's summit too, that, you have a comp plan, but the strategic plan is how you realize those things.
so there is a detailed implementation list, or what you would probably call a strategic plan specific to the comprehensive plan. Director Johnson actually gave an update on kind of the status of all of those implementation items. It's a long list. And she'll do that kind of on a regular basis for the board. And then you, as a board, have a strategic plan, obviously, that we've adopted annually.
Right.
That's kind of a one-year strategic plan.
Through Mr. Piper, right?
That's right.
That's the one, okay, so that's great though, we're just calling it by a different name.
That's right. We call it an implementation plan of the comprehensive plan, yeah.
All right, and just finally, thank you, Attorney Smith, for all the updates on public meetings. I know I'm still getting a lot of emails, calls. A lot of people are frustrated by it, so the script helps, clerk, that I could read off. I'll probably shorten it, but a lot of it, words. But this is really great. I think it's just new for community members too. And I think it also lists, they might see initially that, oh, there's some bias in that, but they just got to understand too that we do the same with developers. If a developer came up here, that's not an appropriate time. They think there's a little bias that, there's more meetings with the developers and with the community. I think, yeah, as this goes on, hopefully this will kind of die down, this issue. I read through the CML documents, that's great. A lot of that's good info. My question is, so with public hearings like Mayor Pro Tem was bringing up with the state, we're actually encouraged to kind of email your legislators earlier. How is that different from a public hearing locally where I'd have to say, I can't even read this email?
So the legislature is considering legislation.
Okay.
So they act very differently.
It's a legislative, not a land use.
Right. They act very differently than a town board. Interestingly, in Colorado, the town board has a quasi-judicial hat that it puts on and acts like a judge, holding mini trials on land use matters. It acts as a legislature, adopting rules and policies by ordinance. And then it also acts administratively. So the legislature doesn't do that. The legislature legislates.
Okay.
So
So they're a different rule book.
absolutely different rule book, yeah. The due process considerations are paramount with respect to you acting as a quasi-judicial board. We have to make sure that the applicant's rights, the public's rights, and of course, the public includes those who want to comment, but also those who are just here and maybe don't want to comment. So we just have to be very sure that we are respecting those due process rights.
Absolutely. Do we mind, is there a way we could put this somewhere? I know we keep asking to add stuff to a website, but that way we could point to it and say, there's an official page for this, or add this to some existing page that this is why we don't allow people to come and speak on a pending land use hearing. So it's not kind of, because we're doing this on the fly. I mean, this is a new thing, so.
Right. I think
Or do we already have something?
Clerk somewhere did a wonderful job of.
This is great.
of
I'm just saying so
researching
the public can see it too. So I can say, check out this link. This is something that's established process now.
Do we have an FAQ section?
We do. We also have our, the current development projects page on the website and under the planning department is where people go to get all the information. They can get all the information about the current submittals and what
So
the
that would be the
status of
perfect
each
page.
project. So it might be great to have a little
Yeah,
blurb
please
right at
note,
the top.
contact your planning department, but your local elected officials can't hear this information, or we can't help you out. One of the.
I think that's probably an easy change for us to make, and that seems like the right place, because if you're going to get information about the status of current development projects, you can get links to their submittal, the plans that have been submitted and everything, and there's information about the status of each project, what step in the process it's in. It seems like that's the right place to have a note about kind of the public hearing process.
Right, yeah.
And I appreciate, something that you mentioned and Clerk Shimura's mentioned to me also. I don't think about it in this way, but I think it's 100% right. It's important that the public remember the board doesn't engage in ex parte communications with the developer either. Right. And so sometimes I think there's this perception that, hey, we don't want to hear from the public, but you don't want to hear from the developer either. You want to do all of that in the public hearing setting so that you can be that neutral judge that's evaluating the project on its merits under the code.
And that the developer is meeting with planning, with staff, because
right.
of that development project, it's not special strategy session.
100%.
Yeah.
There's no strategy. What we're doing is looking at the technical aspects of that project. It's adherence with the code and all of our requirements. That's what staff does.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I already emailed Administrator Kirk. There's been some business hiccups and stuff, but it looks like you guys will be getting into that with some downtown businesses. So that's all I have. Staff, turn it over to you guys.
A couple of things tonight. Just looking ahead, in the context of the water conversation tonight, I thought I'd mention that on April 8th, we currently have scheduled for your board meeting another water project update. So if you'll remember, Director Matthews from the utility department came last year and gave an update on all of our projects. He's intending to do that again on the 8th, and then also we'll talk about the water efficiency plan that's underway. So so you get an update about the status of that project. So just since that came up tonight, that is coming up at your next meeting. Friday before last, the 14th, I had the opportunity to attend the GOCO annual board meeting, Great Outdoors Colorado. So we had submitted a grant to GOCO that you, I think, are aware of. I know you're aware of, for the acquisition of potentially 2 farms along the Little Thompson River corridor. On the 14th, GOCO approved that grant, and so we're looking forward to closing on one of those farms next week, actually. So a 100-acre farm adjacent to County Road 5, just east of town along the Little Thompson River corridor. And then we have kind of general, what I would call a verbal agreement on the other farm that we need to get finalized and have that letter of intent signed, and we can get that purchase agreement done. But that would be west of County Road 15A, or west of First Street. So immediately south of town. If we're able to finalize both of those transactions, the Shaw Farm, we should close next Tuesday, pending a couple of last minute water due diligence items that we'll finalize this week. But we expect to close on that. We will hopefully close on the other property at some time within the next 12 months. There's some land use actions the board may have to take in order to make that happen. So it's a little bit more complicated process. But nevertheless, once that's done, between the Shaw Farm, the Lewis Heritage Farm that we helped the FAA preserve, the Beavis Farm that we purchased, the wastewater treatment plant, and this other farm west of County Road 5, that would be about 3.5 to 4 miles of river frontage, at least one side of the river preserved in perpetuity, either through conservation easements or public. And so we're really excited. After we close the Shaw deal, hopefully next Tuesday, we're going to do a bunch of press. There's already been some press because I did a couple of interviews today, as a matter of fact, because of the GOCO grant. But we don't technically own it yet, so the town won't do our press until after we close next week. But we'd like the public to really understand that there's been a significant effort by this board, prior boards, prior town staffs, this town staff, to really make a concerted effort to preserve major areas of open space along the river. And that's really coming to
very
fruition.
innovative stuff that's above and beyond.
We're excited. I think there's going to be some opportunities to do some even more innovative stuff, and we're building partnerships through some of these acquisitions that are going to really open up, hopefully, some major areas along the river corridor. And, the river corridor east of town today is undeveloped generally because everything east of town is undeveloped generally today. But, who knows what that'll look like 50 or 100 years from now. And I don't think anybody will look back and say, man, I wish we didn't preserve 1,000 acres of open space along this river. And so it's one of those things that I think we'll all look back in the future and see as a big legacy. So anyway, excited about that. In parallel with that, we applied for a grant to the Colorado Water Conservation Board for a river. I don't know what the official name is. In my mind, it's like a river master plan for the Little Thompson. We'll be working with some partner agencies and some consulting firms to evaluate the land and water resources along the Little Thompson River with the goal of developing strategies and a plan for maximizing both environmental benefits along the river, improving habitat, improving stream flows, improving water quality, but also then maximizing the water rights that we're acquiring as part of some of these acquisitions. For town benefit as well. And so how can we balance, town and development needs with environmental needs, stream flow, water quality, and putting some real actionable strategies in place to do that. So that's exciting. We did get word that grant has also been approved. So we'll start work on that, hopefully in the very near future. Let's see. We talked about Chief Charles, just to confirm, I did hear back from him today, so he'll be at your next board meeting as well, to give you an update on your proposed tax measure. The Colorado Municipal League hosts district meetings. I think we're CML District 2 up here. They host those meetings a couple of times a year, and we will be hosting one in May. So go ahead and pencil this in on your calendars. We'll send you the specifics, but May 22nd, which is a Thursday, will be the CML district meeting here locally in Berthoud. We're also finalizing that location. It's probably going to be at the TPC Clubhouse, but we've got to finalize all those details. And if not, we may choose to host it at the rec center. We'll kind of see how that plays out. But go ahead and put that on your calendar if you would, May 22nd. Municipal officials, elected officials from all over our district will be here for that CML district meeting.
Do you know what time, start time? You say 7?
I think social hours 5:30. But we will send you all the specifics. I think it's 5:30 for an hour, and then the actual meeting starts at 6:30.
Okay.
And then lastly, the Loveland Berthoud Area Association of Realtors, as you know, in the past, they've hosted receptions here at Town Hall, typically before a board meeting. It's just a chance for them to come and hear from town staff and whichever trustees want to attend. They provide some appetizers. We typically notice that as like a special meeting so that it's clear that there's trustees in attendance. They have asked if a Thursday would be a better day. Tuesdays sometimes can be tough, especially right before a board meeting. I don't know if you have a preference as a board, if it's a Tuesday or a Thursday, if you want to continue having those. As staff, we typically present to the Realtors Association kind of what's going on in town, but they'd love to have your participation or attendance as well.
Tuesday makes sense because, I mean, we just didn't, none of us went last year just because it was kind of last minute.
Yeah,
but, if we're all lined up to a meeting afterwards, then you probably get more participation. Plus, there's a hard stop time.
To me, that seems like the right choice as well, but they mentioned that they had spoken to somebody at the town, I don't know who that was,
Oh, okay.
and felt like it might be better on a Thursday. But that didn't seem to make as much sense to me. I think Tuesday before a board meeting makes sense. So if you guys are okay with that, they're looking at some time in May or maybe June, and we'll work on a date with them. Send that out. That's it for me.
All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Have a good night.